Welcome, everybody, to today's AMA. Today's guest is Alan Vey from Aventus. Alan, how are you doing today?
Hey, Tom, all good, thanks. Good to be here. Nice to chat to everyone.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to have you here. So we have a short bio from you that we're. Oh, hold on. Some feedback there. Okay, I believe we should be all good. But okay, so here's a short bio for Alan, so we can get to know you a little bit. Alan is a Forbes 30 Under 30 winner for his work as the co-founder and CEO of Aventus Network. Before moving into blockchain, Alan worked at Deloitte in the entrepreneurial business department and macro hedge fund Braven Howard. He completed a master's degree in artificial intelligence at Imperial College London, and his master's thesis was on blockchain technology, during which he co-founded Aventus. So pretty impressive, Alan. Would you like to add anything to the bio for us to get to know you a little bit better?
Thanks, man. Maybe just all of this started at Imperial, right? So I was doing my undergrad in computer science. I think that bio says Masters in Artificial Intelligence. And my master's was fortunately in 2015, the year Ethereum launched. So I went to my professor and I was like, I'd been working in the hedge fund, and I was like, I'm going to predict the price of Bitcoin. He was like, forget about Bitcoin. That's old news. Have a look at this cool new thing called smart contracts and Ethereum.
Okay.
And then digging in, saw how cool that was. And that's really where everything kind of starts properly.
Cool. So Aventus was actually started some time ago. It's good to know that you guys are well experienced in the space already. So, Alan, why don't we jump in and talk about the project a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about Aventus Network? What is the selling proposition, and tell us about your journey as to how you got to this point?
Yeah, for sure. So we started out kind of out of uni, like I mentioned, right? That was still looking at film rights distribution. In 2016, we raised a small round of investment from some guys now called CoinShares. Danny Masters, Jean-Marie, the founder and CEO, both been closely involved in the project since then. And we started rolling out what we had pitched as an offering for event ticketing. We were looking at how we're going to deal with some of the inefficiencies in the secondary market, how we can help that ticket delivery solution, essentially. 2017, we moved to doing our ICO. Received 60,000 Ether and 60% of the AVT supply very quickly. Was about $20 million at the time. Ether was $300 back then. And we got building. So fast forward a few years, we with our ticketing offer, we did deals with Live Nation, various smaller sort of players within the space. That was through a business that we created in Los Angeles called FanDragon. But then COVID obviously hit that sector really hard. And what we then looked at is we sat back and thought, what can we do? Treasury had obviously expanded significantly. Ether went from $300 to, well, 5,000 at one point. Yeah. So we had more treasury, and we thought, how can we deliver additional utility to the AVT community? So that's when we productized Aventus into what's sort of referred to as a layer 2 space now, right? We were looking at scalability. We can do up to sort of 2,000 transactions per second. Fast confirmations, about 0.1 seconds to get your transaction confirmed. And then low costs, but also predictable costs, no volatility on the price itself. So that's what we set out to do. We productized that. Obviously, you can imagine in dealing with big corporate entities like the ones we were dealing with, you had to build sort of enterprise software, which means we had to go a little bit further, make sure we had all that discipline, the kind of APIs to access the ecosystem, enterprise-grade key management, all of that, should we say, less sexy stuff, but essential stuff to make sure you roll out properly. And that's what Aventus became. But now the proposition has kind of evolved since then. We've moved across various different markets, and we're moving much more into, so we see those as hygiene factors now, the scalability, the price and all of that, especially with Ethereum moving to Ethereum 2.0. And we are more and more focused on interoperability. We've kind of seen in the blockchain space how we're starting to get siloed value to a degree, right? Ethereum was very dominant. It's kind of split up now. We've got obviously Cardano, Solana, various of the other top 10s taking market share. we firmly believe in the sort of Polkadot vision of interoperability, connecting it all up again, right? So that's why we're built on Substrate. We're moving towards becoming a parachain. And it's really about connecting up that value and creating the bridges to the appropriate ecosystems. So that's where Aventus is today. And that's kind of what differentiates us from some of the layer twos, maybe.
Got it. But just to be clear, are you guys still doing the ticketing stuff, or did you guys pivot from that?
So yeah, we've got Aventus is sort of the core engine, right? The layer two blockchain. And one of the various sort of aspects is ticketing. So yes, we still pursued the kind of ticketing vision, but then we're also immediately after that, we moved into loyalty. So we're active across sort of 8 territories globally in loyalty. Then we moved into supply chains, a couple gold deals in Dubai, but then more soft commodities, looking at how sort of trade finance transparency through the supply chain, and then the sort of trade finance elements you can build on top of that. After that, we moved into video games as well, looking at in-game currencies, in-game economies, how you can incentivize those from a fungible token perspective. And then most recently, sort of beginning of last year, NFTs. So we have a couple of different plays that we ourselves have built. And then, of course, there are the third parties we've partnered with across these different sectors. So we got a lot wider than just ticketing. But yes, ticketing is still one of the various applications we pursue.
Yeah, got it. It definitely seems like you guys have expanded and made some very well-rounded use cases. So, Alan, what have been Aventus's key successes since the launch last year?
Yeah, so we properly with the sort of layer two proposition went into production in February last year. I'd say some of the key successes is, so we've been running for a year now. The network hasn't fallen over. The network hasn't been hacked. So in the blockchain space, that's always positive.
A success, yeah.
Yeah, we ran our staking program for the first year. We're a proof of stake blockchain, right? So people stake the token, and in return for securing the network through that stake and processing transactions, they receive fees from the people who are sending transactions, right? So in terms of stake, we got 25% of the total supply of AVT ended up being staked in that first year, it's 2.5 million AVT. And on that AVT, we generated a 6% return in fees. So for first year of operation, we felt that to be solid, and it's been growing significantly since then. So that's one of the big wins. And now just sort of expanding, right? More adoption, more use cases. So far, it's really only been a B2B solution where businesses have been able to integrate Aventus. And now we're very close this quarter and the next sort of few weeks. We're looking at opening it up properly with a sort of wallet partner, and anybody will be able to properly interact with Aventus now.
Cool, very cool. Since you're talking a little bit about the upcoming plans, maybe let's discuss what are Aventus's long-term ambitions and how do you plan to achieve those?
Yeah, for sure. So let's look at a couple of different timelines, right? For immediate next objectives is mainly around that gateway API product I was just talking about, and a wallet product, letting people interact with the network in any way they like without interacting with our engineers. Also launching phase 2 of the staking program. There'll be a lot of interesting stuff around that. Then we're looking to more and more move towards becoming a parachain. So by the end of this year, I expect we'll be a parachain properly plugged into the Polkadot ecosystem, essentially deriving our security from Polkadot rather than Ethereum as we do now, whilst maintaining that bridge to allow assets to kind of flow back and forth, right? So those are the kind of major milestones this year. By the end of next year, we want to be in a position where we've moved to sort of full decentralization, where the AVT community is governing all the votes, all of the code has been completely open sourced, and we've really kind of stimulated that ecosystem, and where we then are no longer sort of playing a major role in that, but rather helping guide from the foundation through sort of governance proposals, or should we say we're playing a major role, but one of many people playing a major role in its sort of decentralized context. So that's the sort of short, medium term plan, and long term is, you know, we're in the business of owning blockchain transactions. Hopefully we can create an offering that's compelling enough to get a significant share of the market.
Got it. Thanks. And can you discuss a little bit more of the reasoning behind moving to Polkadot from Ethereum?
Sure. So It's really primarily around the point of interoperability, right? Ethereum dominance is decreasing whilst it's still the hub for DeFi and whatnot. And I expect with Ethereum 2.0, it'll really allow Ethereum to properly reclaim some of the land that it's lost. But like any tech that's evolving, I mean, I would make the analogy to the way the internet rolled out, right? We're seeing some things very similar to that. The internet started as a bunch of separate intranets, right, that weren't connected up. And then we connected them all together, and that's where we got that real value, that real network effect. I see the future of the blockchain industry to be the same. Ethereum, whilst the biggest in terms of smart contracts and wider functionality than what Bitcoin offers, whilst they're the biggest, they're not the only one, and there'll be various different niches that people can optimize towards that'll always exist. So I think it's essential to connect that all up again with that interoperable piece. Being a part of the Polkadot ecosystem allows us to really make that happen in a major way. So that's why the choice to moving more and more closely aligned on that front.
That's fair. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I mean, Ethereum is definitely the most widely adopted, but Polkadot seems to offer more of the interoperability. So it's always welcome when projects are willing to test out other platforms like that. And Alan, what are the biggest milestones achieved by Aventus to this point in terms of interoperability now that we were just speaking about it?
Yep, so we've built out our chain on Substrate. We've gone through the phases of we launched before Polkadot did in production, which meant that we have a live sort of network processing transaction. So looking at how you migrate the state of a live network over to the parachain infrastructure, doing a lot of work around that, ensuring that we're up to date with that whole ecosystem. Took a lot of work from the technical front, but we feel like we have a firm grip on that, and by the end of this quarter, we'll have a proper game plan. The bridge that we have into Ethereum, we've also built that in a sort of template way that'll be very easy to extend that to various other ecosystems. So the kind of messaging protocol and that two-way communication, both reading state from the layer 2 and posting state back into that layer 2, we've got a nice structure that's scalable there as well. So as we plug into sort of Polkadot, we'll still have the ability to create that bridge then into whatever, Cardano, Solana, whatever else is required and hasn't been pulled into that ecosystem of connectivity. So essentially it's both ways, right? On the way up in terms of security into Polkadot, but also on the way sort of downstream with those bridges into the key ecosystems. So in terms of our infrastructure, that's where we've done a lot of thinking and had some wins.
Got it. Great. Glad to hear. And can you talk to us a little bit about what is the Aventus roadmap to becoming a parachain? What does that look like?
Sure. So the most challenging part is what I just touched on there, migrating a live chain over that derives its sort of as a sovereign chain, or should we say sovereign outside of Polkadot into that Polkadot ecosystem without disrupting any of our clients as we do that. So obviously we'll start with a test network, probably quite similar to the Kusama Polkadot philosophy, right? We have something similar first, where we can test it out, and then migrating the clients over without disrupting their service. That was one of the challenges, but we feel we have a good solution there. And obviously the guys in the Polkadot ecosystem obviously building tools. They said it will probably be ready this quarter. So whether it's that one or we do something a bit manual, we know what our game plan is there. Furthermore, it's then looking towards parachain auction, right? Looking at how we're going to structure things. There's a bit of a difference into how the economics of the AVT token works, or at least in terms of how you reward people for being involved in that parachain auction. So we've got all of the information around that coming out. We've done all this sort of game theory design on that front. So yeah, I think across those two buckets in terms of the token and the fundamental tech migration, that's where we've really sort of added to the roadmap. Ultimately, we're hoping Q3 is when we'll then go for that parachain slot and be able to do that migration.
Cool, very cool. It seems like it's coming up soon, so good luck with that. Next question would be, we're having some questions from the audience that I'm going to put up here on screen. Okay, first one is, so what advantages do you guys have to compete with other big blockchains such as Polygon?
Yeah, so I would say it's really the points we've been speaking around, right? This notion of interoperability. Now with Ethereum 2.0 coming out and Ethereum promising potentially up to 10,000 transactions per second as the rollout completes, I think we're going to see a significant shift in the layer 2 space as to where people build their initial applications, because that's going to be taken care of in Ethereum itself. So whilst individual use cases that have high throughput requirements will still need layer 2 solutions, right? We've seen Vitalik talking about this. It's Ethereum 2.0 plus layer 2s that are ultimately going to be the win for the ecosystem. It's going to be interesting to see how the functionality and the user bases evolve as that rolling out. And we were considering the same thing for our ecosystem. So that point of interoperability and allowing all of that good stuff to still exist that we see from layer 2, but also plugging into a more interoperable ecosystem and then having that sort of enterprise wrapper around it. Our core goal, we've gone after a lot of existing sort of corporate relationships, right? Existing businesses that are looking to integrate blockchains. So that is where we're quite different in our rollout. We started very much B2B, very much under the radar to get the fundamentals right, to get the tech solid. And now we're rolling out to the more B2C element where people can actually use the network to transact value. That strategy and that approach in market for how we've pursued the rollout of blockchain is also a key differentiator.
Got it. Thanks. And then another question from the audience, since we were touching on the fee generation earlier and how much you guys have been able to collect. But Mehmet asked, revenue is an important aspect for all projects to survive and maintain the company. What is the way to generate profit or revenue of the token? What is the income model?
Okay, so this is to a point ambiguous. Is it around the token or the company? But I'll answer both, right? So for the token itself, we're a proof of stake blockchain, as I mentioned before. So anybody can stake and help secure the network through that economic state to process transactions and in return earn fees for it. For the first year, there was a 6% return on 25% of the total AVT supply being staked. I think it was 150,000 AVT, somewhere in that ballpark. That was generated in fees, like 1.5% of the total supply. So that is a revenue model, but obviously long-term Aventus, today we only operate 30% of the network. So the other 70% sits with third parties who are all generating their kind of revenue from that and the various staking schemes that run. So a small component of revenue for the actual business that is Aventus comes from that node. And then long term, what we see for the business of Aventus in terms of a business model is value-added services in the ecosystem. So if people are familiar with Ethereum and Infura, for example, essentially it's when you build software, right? Today, when you have these blockchain nodes or validators or miners, whatever ecosystem language you're using, you interact with that technology typically using sort of remote procedure calls, right? It's a specific way you interact with it that is uncommon for enterprise software. You typically build layers on top of that kind of core infrastructure. So those layers, as you move through an enterprise stack, is where we see opportunity for value-added services. Supporting people in the sort of Linux Red Hat model where you can kind of help people deploy and help a managed service around that node and keeping it operating, where you wrap APIs around a node and allow functionality like proxying, paying for people's transactions on their behalf, so not all users on a platform have to have that. All of that kind of infrastructure and additional value add that can be built on top of these blockchain networks is where we're focusing in on, right? It's a lot of what like Consensus built for Ethereum in the early days.
Got it. Thanks. And then let's go and jump in through some questions from Twitter. So we have a question here from Crypto Azu. So projects like to speak about long-term vision and mission, but what are your short-term objectives? So we know you talked about Parachain on a Q3 potentially, but what else can you share with us in terms of short-term objectives?
Yeah, so I've touched on a few of these, right? Gateway API, allowing anybody moving from our B2B model to a more B2C model, where anybody can sort of send Aventus transactions, hold their Aventus tokens, interact with the staking, all of that. A bit of a rework to our Explorer, and how that looks, just giving more and more pertinent information. Obviously, as you've had a product live for a year, you get a lot of product feedback and you can iterate and improve that. Governance, we've just rolled out some governance proposals, but we want to more and more engage the community and let all decisions be community driven. And by community, I mean one AVT, one vote kind of thing, right? So it's governance, Explorer for transparency, the core network, obviously in terms of functionality, migrating over to Polkadot, and then it's about adoption across key interesting sectors, and more we're fleshing out our sort of strategy there. So in the short term as well, I'm saying between now and the end of the year, right, is also adding some of the key building blocks in Aventus of DeFi. So we're looking at DEXs, automated market makers, all of that kind of functionality that is sort of requirements for some of the bigger sort of steps you can take within the network. So today we support all the sort of fungible token and non-fungible token functionality and various sort of bells and whistles on top of that. But we kind of want to flesh that out more.
Got it. Thanks. And another question from Twitter. What are current dApps on Aventus, and which industries will you focus on? I know you said a wide array of different industries that you guys can expand to, but maybe just the ones that you will be focusing in the short term.
Sure. So right now we're already active across event ticketing, loyalty, so across sort of 8 territories globally, and our offering and loyalty. And loyalty, essentially with blockchain, what you can do is restructure how you look at that debt obligation that is a loyalty scheme. Every one loyalty point is backed by 1 cent or whatever, right? It has a dollar value, and that sits on somebody's book somewhere until it's redeemed. With blockchain tokens, you can make that much cheaper and much more efficient. You don't have to wait for the settlement between merchant and client and all of that kind of stuff. So loyalty, we're digging in significantly more. Supply chains, more and more looking, especially in Africa. There's a lot of opportunity there. Now with NFTs as well, right, in DeFi, looking at purchase orders against, or should we say debt financing against purchase orders across the supply chain to really bring money into developing ecosystems where there's a lot of value. So there's a lot we're doing in supply chain. Video games, more and more. We've got a couple of gaming tokens within the ecosystem. It's a good 600,000 users across those use cases. But what we're trying to do there now is sort of generalize that into a template structure that anybody can just roll in gaming, because many of the in-game currencies look very similar. NFTs, a lot we've been doing in NFTs. We've got some big announcements of IP. We've been able to lock down big name, like world names that everybody will know. So there's a lot of exciting stuff, but I can't quite disclose those yet. So it's worth keeping an eye on the NFT side of what's happening in the Aventus ecosystem. And then beyond that, we're busy actively exploring aviation and music applications beyond the simple NFT. So we've seen a lot of the stuff Snoop Dogg has done, but really reimagining how some of the stuff within the music industry can be done. So those are 2 new projects we've taken on this year. In aviation, I'm talking cargo tracking through the supply chain. There's some great use cases there. It's really an extension to some of the existing supply chain stuff we have. So that's where we're focused on. But with this move to now anybody being able to build on Aventus without our support, we're hoping to also just naturally see where the community sees sort of additional benefits and support that through grants from the foundation. So more and more, it'll become some of the things we're focusing on, but some of the things we're being led on through the community.
Got it. And then next from Twitter, a little bit more of a lighthearted question here. What is the first thing you would like people to think of when Aventus Network is mentioned to them? You can take your time. I know these questions usually take some but go ahead.
That one takes a little bit of thinking, but I think off the top of my head, what I would say is maybe integrity is the wrong word, but the way we've rolled out our ecosystem, right, has been quite different in the blockchain space. We've taken a little longer. Obviously, we've gone via a couple of routes, starting in ticketing and then really finding our feet here in the sort of layer 2 scaling space. But we've always done it with high degrees of regulated entities involved. We have a lot of big funds, a lot of regulated entities that kind of sit on the board and help us manage things. We've done it with all that sort of corporate discipline And we've gone after a corporate market first, where it's absolutely essential. We've never been involved in any of sort of pump and dump schemes. We've never been involved in any of this, some of the grayer behavior that people see happen within the blockchain ecosystem, right? We've tried to keep our noses very clean, guess where the lines are going to be, and hold ourselves to security standards, even though those don't apply to utility tokens. So we've really tried to be disciplined and done it from looking at an industry that's evolving so quickly, with so much risk, with so much uncertainty, with hacks happening all the times, to some of the best projects. We felt it important to move a little slower, and when we move, be as solid as possible. So this is software, always has bugs in it. It's unavoidable. There's a good chance things will fall over at some point, but trying our best to stay on the side of move fundamentals first and then talk about it, rather than the reverse, which we've seen a lot of. So I think that point around fundamentals first, that's what I'd like people to think when they think of Aventus.
That's a good one. Fundamentals first. So next, so this is kind of like a two-part question, and since you briefly touched on it, we were discussing fundamentals first. I'll go over to the second part of it. What are security measures against future attacks? Maybe can you talk to us a little bit about what you guys are doing in terms of security?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the important parts of security is never telling anybody exactly what you're doing. So there's a bigger state space. They have to guess when they do attack you. So at a high level, what I'd say is one key element to security is decentralization, right? We saw the 600 odd million hack that happened recently in the space to the sort of Axie Infinity base chain. And that was due to security standards around keys and degree of decentralization. So to mitigate stuff like that, we obviously we only have 30% of the network ourselves that we control. We do not control the majority. Even if Aventus were compromised, the network would be fine. We're not a central party that's integral to that network, right? That's the premise of decentralization. So ensuring that you have control in the network spread across many different parties with different incentives that are all not necessarily aligned with us or each other, which means that you kind of have people fighting their own camps. So that point of decentralization, and then when picking those partners, and we put forward to the community to vote to accept the partners that we thought made sense, all of which passed with, 1.5 million votes per proposal. So it was great turnout. But the point there being, we chose these partners and ensured that they had the appropriate standards, right? That they had the appropriate security protocols in place. Our CTO, Andre, he was the guy who helped bring Oracle into the cloud. He ran an engineering team of 80 people there. So he learned from big tech, the security standards. And then he was the guy who built the sort of R3, the banking consortium, the product Corda Enterprise. So he's come from a background of big corporates, regulation, really ensuring that you have your documented processes and your security management around banking infrastructure and big tech. So applying some of those protocols and ensuring you kind of stick to that has been a big part of the philosophy that we feel makes it, to this point in time, strong.
Got it. And then a few more questions here. We're receiving some from YouTube as well. Here's a general one that is common and is important for projects. Partners are very important for every project today. May I know which partners you have now and which partners you guys are planning to have in the future?
Sure. So partners is very general question. So I'll touch on a couple of buckets, right? There sort of, should we say, strategic partners or funds and investors that are involved. There are client relationships, and then just sort of a general bucket that doesn't fall within each of those. So I would say our tightest relationships on the fund side is CoinShares. They provide traditional, they're a regulated entity. They've IPO'd on the Nordic NASDAQ. They bring sort of traditional crypto products for a regulated real world market. So they're some of the first guys who moved there, and they're tightly involved with us and have helped us sort of build up from early on. Jean-Marie is still involved, the CEO is still involved sort of on the board of the Aventus Foundation. Then Skytail Ventures, SkyTel Ventures is headed up by Mark Kachia. They are, the first fund they did took only 3 bets in the blockchain space. I believe it was Polkadot, Energy Web, and Ocean Protocol, and did really well seeing those early on. And Mark is very integrated in the various ecosystems. So having them as partners and helping us push, that's where a lot of the Polkadot relationships have come from, where you can kind of come in that circle of trust because you've already built that relationship. So I'd say they're also key partners in the ecosystem, and there are many more on that front. I'm just picking on those 2 in particular for now. Partners, when we look in other areas, I mean, we've got key partners. Let me just name a couple across the different sectors I spoke before, right? So for ticketing, obviously FanDragon, there's a business as well, Match Badge now, Pitch Pass. In loyalty, Cashback app, Vow Currency. In supply chains, we've looked at Coral, Artos, have both been involved there. When we get to video games, that's Fruit Lab or the PIP token. Those are key partners in that sector. Then in NFTs, we've got Via NFT, Cavalieri Digital, and various others. An example there as well is I don't know, actually, that partnership is yet to become public. So I'll leave that for now. But yeah, that gives a good example. I think I've given you a good idea of what we have across the ecosystem.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. And then a little bit more on the build side here. Another question from YouTube. Is there any developer guide to integrate or play around creating use cases in Aventus protocol?
So this is what we're launching now. We've been very much B2B, where we've only dealt with corporate so far, and that's where all of our traffic and users have come from. We're launching the Gateway API product we're really onboarding our clients onto it. The public press launch things happening now in the next few weeks. So with that push, all of the documentation, you guys can see if you track our hiring, we hired a developer relations sort of role late last year, and that's really where we started building up a lot of the documentation. You've seen a new white paper come out now, which shows the details of how everything works. That's obviously updated frequently, and all of the documentation and press push is now coming around that Gateway API, which will be the first time that developers can properly just play around with and see what's going on with Aventus.
Got it. Thanks, Alan. And then just a more general question, because we have to wrap it up briefly. Just in general, because we're trying to push and incentivize building in general across the blockchain ecosystem. What would you tell somebody without any technical knowledge that would like to embark in that journey towards, eventually, potentially being a developer in Aventus? How would you recommend for them to get educated and hands-on into, what are the resources that online that you would recommend the most? How does one embark in that journey towards getting technically savvy enough to be able to develop on something on a platform like Aventus?
Yeah, I mean, I would even argue that the research element is the smaller part of that task. So obviously reading through, we've got sort of blog.aventus.io where we start digging into, and I know Alex Pinto, one of our sort of real key guy when it comes to cryptography, he puts out some very technical research, but that is once you understand things. So there's a journey you can go through that, and on our GitHub there's some docs as well for Aventus specific. I think for the wider blockchain industry as well, there's a bunch of good programs, whether it's on YouTube, different courses, sort of 101 of blockchain, 101 of NFTs, all of these on Coursera or otherwise. That kind of base knowledge, just where somebody has structured something across the breadth, allows anybody to then pinpoint, actually, this is my area of key interest, then dig in with the base chain. But let's say that's 25% of the effort. The rest of it, I would say, is getting involved in the communities and talking to people, talking to the people who are there, coming to Telegram. Our Telegram is sort of at Aventus Network, going on Reddit, talking to people in the different communities there. Starting at the top level, I would always suggest that it's Ethereum, and then kind of filtering down from there. And just talking things through with people, understanding there are a lot of very, very smart people that sit in those communities from a decentralized context, and maybe this is their side hustle, maybe they complete decentralized sort of make their money that way. So there's a lot of value to be had and a lot to be said for joining the community and chatting to people.
Great. Thanks for the advice, Alan. So at this point, we're getting to the stage in which we have to wrap it up. So, Alan, any other parting comments before we close?
I think that's pretty much it from me. Yeah, any information, always keen to hear from people what they think we're doing and whatnot. So please get involved in the conversation on Telegram or join our mailing list on Aventus.io.
Yep. Here we're putting up on screen for everybody to go ahead and follow Aventus on Twitter. And with that said, thank you everybody for watching and tuning in today. Thank you, Alan, for being here. And until next time.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.